Wow, what a wonderful piece. I don't know about you guys, but right now where I'm at, it's over 100 degrees. So some fresh tracks would be ideal right about now. But I'd like to hand the conversation over to Mallory Weggemann, the two-time Paralympian and bronze and gold medalist and executive producer of Fresh Tracks. Thank you for being here, Mallory.
Thank you for having us. This is awesome. And here in Minnesota, it's not quite 100 degrees, but watching that, I was like, ooh, I want to go skiing again. But that's a post-Tokyo deal. So us summer athletes need to wait just a little bit longer before we get to go play in some snow. But we have Andrew here, and Andrew's a pro at playing in the snow. And Jay, who I'm excited to have here as well. This is my first, really quick. I get to chat with Andrew, but then, well, Jeremy, but I call him Jay, who's my husband. So this is kind of fun to get to, chat with him while sitting next to him and our little group right here. But I think first things first, for all of you guys who watched, if you have questions while we're just kind of having a little chat, since this is a nice, small, intimate group, feel free to throw them in the chat box. I just set that up over on the side of my screen so I can see those come through if you guys have any questions. But I would love to talk with Andrew for a little bit, because Andrew, you guys are going to tell the minute he starts speaking, was the narrator for Fresh Tracks and did such an incredible job. But Andrew himself is a Paralympian and an incredibly fierce skier. And so at this stage in his career, fierce, I mean, talk about liking to go fast. Andrew maybe doesn't know anything other than fast. But I think one of the things that's really neat is here he is at this stage in his career getting ready for Beijing 2022. And Andrew, you use an outrigger. And here we are watching about Paul Limecooler and that innovation and forethought to design something that maybe at the time seemed, the way they explained it, it sounds so simple of, the forearm crutch mixed with the short ski at the bottom, but it's make or break in your career as a professional athlete and a Paralympian and how you accomplish what you've accomplished on the mountain. So I would love to hear your perspective a little bit just about kind of that innovation and how you've experienced it in your own athletic career all these years later. You're on mute.
I know, I had to turn it on. So first off, that was awesome. I really enjoyed that. That was my first time actually getting to see it and get to watch it. It's a little weird hearing my own voice as always, but I thought it was pretty cool. And that was pretty awesome. The life story of Paul is something now I'm always going to think about whenever I go skiing, very simply put. I'll always think about it. So I think that, as you know, it's the largest step towards freedom as both an individual and an athlete. Being someone with a disability, we're always looking for the next step that can kind of give us what we used to have before, the next step to normal, or the next version of ourselves. And I think that the outrigger is the number one step for me. It changed my entire life. Skiing changed my entire life, helped to raise my perspective on what was possible for myself as an individual and a person with a disability. Skiing changed my entire life, and I know that wouldn't have been possible without the outrigger. And getting to watch that entire video and how Paul kind of brought it to America and really gave us the invention was pretty cool. And to see it be adapted and moved into what it is now. I mean, I have custom color outriggers that are titanium made to a specific length and don't really work with anyone but myself. They work on ice, they work in powdered snow, they work anywhere and everywhere. And to see it get adapted and help to give people with disabilities freedom throughout the world is something that's pretty awesome. And it was exciting to see the life story of the innovator and the one man that made that possible. Pretty cool.
It's really cool. And I think what's so neat too is hearing that story through the perspective of skiing in particular, because when you look at various different sports throughout the adaptive community and Paralympic movement itself, you know, every one sport is a little bit different in the nuances of how that technology plays into it. But what I thought was so fascinating watching that is seeing Paul and how he brought technology in all those years ago, and then how Mike is now bringing it in on the slopes in the sport of snowboarding and through adaptive sports, and kind of that modern day journey of somebody who's looked to be a pioneer, which I think is just such a remarkable thing, because as you can attest to, I mean, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you first got into your sit ski, how many versions of tinkering around did it take to finally figure out how to position yourself in the sit ski in the way that's the most optimal for you to go down the mountain?
It's still happening. I mean, it's the constant pursuit of perfection. And like I said before, you know, it's finding the version of yourself of who you were before. I mean, it's very simple, you know, finding freedom is what it is. You know, you can't get out and go walk up stairs. You can't get out and go hiking up a mountain. You can't do a lot of other things being an individual with a disability without cool innovations like this. And that's really what it's all about. And I think this movie as a whole introduces that to people who don't always understand that perspective. You know, adaptive athletes need adaptive equipment. We are always tinkering, always finding new ways to better ourselves and to better us as a whole, so that we can live the life that we want to live. And, you know, a lot of times, and whether it comes down to driving a vehicle, whether it comes down to flying an airplane, driving a boat, or whatever it may be, whenever you need to just use your legs, we have to find innovation and adaptability with it. And this showed that, you know, for people who have disabilities, for snowboarding, for skiers, for just about anything, you know, you have to kind of find that method of innovation that helps you to move forward. And Paul made a legacy out of it because he was the first to really make that. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with that, what was interesting to me is as you watched the film and you saw the old newspaper clippings and headlines, you started seeing older age terminology and how individuals with disabilities were portrayed and addressed. And they talked even about the clinic and how a lot of them had 15, 20 stairs. And that was obviously pre-ADA. And so you start thinking through just societally what was going on in our world when he came back from the war with his leg and got into becoming a prosthetist and figuring this world out. And it makes me think of just conversations that Jay and I have had with our passion as it correlates to TFA group and what Angel City Sports is doing and what the Paralympic movement is doing. And now it's like he was the innovator in the outrigger, but in so many ways, he also was using sport as his catalyst to change the conversation. And I think that's the interesting thing to me, where you look at it today in 2020, sport is our catalyst to change perception of what disability is, to spark the conversation, to really change the stigma around it, if you will. And I think that is such a powerful thing. And Jay, you've experienced that through your career in storytelling. Andrew, you've experienced it through your career in quite literally being a Paralympian. And what Clayton and the Angel City sports team are doing, like, they're seeing that every single day through their clinics and through the work that they're doing. And just right now, I mean, we're together because COVID-19 hit and they couldn't have the games. So they figured, hey, guess what? We're going to innovate and we're going to bring it to you virtually and make it far longer than we could have ever had if we were just in LA for the games for 4 days. So with that, I kind of want to dovetail to you, Jay. And this is so fun. I get to look at him in person and ask versus like be on a screen. So bear with me, guys, like geek out with my husband. But, you know, you've been exposed to the Paralympic movement for about a decade now. Yep. And in that time, what would you say is the biggest thing you've seen change with the movement?
Oh, the biggest thing, I think the biggest thing has been the I think the acceptance in the media, I would say, we're starting to see, as this week we've had, Rising Phoenix on Netflix that premiered globally. We're seeing films out there like, some of the ones we're doing, but others that are out there. We're seeing media integrate the Paralympic movement in ways that haven't been done before. I remember when I first got into it in 2010, 2011, you're pitching media, you're trying to talk to media, and they're saying Paralympic, what is that? I have no idea. And you're talking to NBC affiliates. You're talking to an NBC affiliate in Minnesota or anywhere else. They had no idea. Or Mallory, would do a segment with them, and that was the first time they've been exposed to adaptive sports. And so 10 years later, we now have been part of the conversation where people are understanding the movement, but we need more. We need more coverage. We need more media, and we need sponsors. We need, more coverage and more acceptance of it. I mean, we're just getting started. I think we're on the right path. I think we have a long ways to go. We're 10 years in, and, looking ahead to LA 28, I think we have an opportunity to really, really flood the market with, adaptive sport content, disability related content, Paralympic themed content, and it just becomes part of the conversation. Just like we talk about Olympians, we're talking about Paralympians.
Yeah, no, I think that is such a powerful thing right there. And, one thing that I always love to hear is how people got exposed. And for you guys who are tuning in, I don't know what your affiliation to the adaptive sports community is. You might be a super fan of Clayton and the entire Freck family, which I'm totally on board with. You could be a longtime Angel City Games supporter, or have a personal connection yourself. But I think it's always interesting when we all kind of, for all of us, stop and it's like, so what was my exposure point? And, I'm going to ask Jay first, and Andrew, I'm going to ask you next, but I want to know, like, what was your exposure point story to the Paralympic movement?
Well, Mallory.
I know this answer. Sorry, guys.
So it was the 2011 ESPYs. And I was there with some other clients, and Mallory was there, and she was nominated and happened to win an ESPY. And her story came up, and started, doing some digging, learning more about the Paralympics. And I had heard about him working on the Olympic side, but didn't really know much about it. And from there, quickly followed, we were at different events, and there was Mallory. Next thing you know, we're talking, and we start working together. And that was the first big exposure to show you had the Olympics, and then you had the Paralympics at that time. And there was such an opportunity that Paralympians needed support. They needed help. They needed representation. They needed that access to brands and media and all that stuff. And it was really untapped at the time. There was a couple other agencies that were dabbling in it, but they really weren't focused on it. And so for me, I looked at it as an opportunity to bring my background as an agent at that time and marketing rep to really dive in and work with the USOC at the time, which is now the USOPC, to provide the support wherever needed. And that's quickly gone from, an agent to now really focused on kind of the social impact, storytelling and production side to say, okay, here's another big hole. How do we fill it? And how do we fill it with content? Whether that's documentaries, TV series, digital content, whatever that is.
Yeah. And Andrew, for you, what was your exposure point? Like, how did you hear about Paralympic sport and the adaptive sport community as an entirety?
So I was always an athlete, and I was a wrestler, and I was really good, and I was wanting to be an Olympian in wrestling. And after I had broken my back, that had kind of all changed, and but still being quite athletic and wanting to pursue competition. I was always competitive, even in like physical therapy. My physical therapist was like, dude, what are you doing? Right? You're not competing with this old lady. I was like, don't tell me what I'm doing. Okay. I know what's going on. And anyways, she was like, look, you've got to try Paralympic sport. So my physical therapist that had known about it, because she works with a lot of people with disabilities, took me there to try ski racing. And the very first time, that was my very first introduction to anything Paralympic. I really didn't know about it until then. And that was about 2 years after my accident. And I skied. I loved it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to be the best in the world at this. And so I've been pursuing it ever since. And it was kind of replaced that hole I had missing in my life from before, because I was a real competitive athlete, you know, national champion. I was always pursuing it, even as a young child, wanting to be the best. And then I broke my back, and everything was there was like a big hole in my life. This big void piece of who I was missing. And then I became 15. I was reintroduced to sport, and Paralympic sport completely changed everything for me. And nowadays you see it on TV, you hear about it on the radio, it's everywhere. And so people who have disabilities are given the opportunity to expand, are giving the opportunity to tell their story and to inspire other lives. And that's something that's super awesome, because, you know, even, I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when, you know, we were first injured or anything, like it was something that was still kind of being introduced. A lot of people didn't see it. A lot of people didn't realize that Paralympic sport was a thing. And now the United States Olympic Committee is now the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. You know, we're finally taken serious. Our stories are finally told on an elite level, and everyone's seeing us as equals. And that's something that is wonderful, especially, you know, for people who, you know, I want to say have kind of been looked down on or not treated as equals. And for the past few years now, we are. It's something that's moving forward. You know, we're treated as actual people, and we're treated as actual athletes, and we're treated the way we work and the way we deserve to be seen. And that's something that's pretty awesome. It's a huge step forward in the global realization of humanity, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a massive step forward, and just that respect that goes along with it. I know when we heard about the USOC changing to the USOPC, there's that element of adding Paralympic into the title of the organization is about so much more than what it does for us as athletes on the field of play. It also starts to heighten the conversation of disability inclusion off the field of play as well. And I think it's a question I'm always interested in asking, because in the past few years since having the honor to attend Angel City Games, when it's been in LA and we've all been able to be together and give hugs and all the things we got to do before COVID, it's so powerful, because you go around that track and you meet kids and families and adults and on down the line. And for some of them, I mean, they literally are there because Clayton chased them down at a gas station. Like, that is the exposure point for people. And it's, to your point, Andrew, like, it's so powerful that it's changed, but there's still that void. And I think that's what's so remarkable. We look at Paul Weimenkooler and that entire family and what they kind of started in their little corner of the world back, you know, however many years ago. And now we're seeing what the movement has done on a global stage, but then we're seeing what organizations like Angel City are doing in their, I'm not even going to call it little corner of the world, because there's such a large presence now. I just think it's fascinating, because one thing we spoke about last year at Angel City Games was how do you take chance out of it? Like, you got lucky, Andrew, you had a PT who knew about it. There's so many people that don't have PTs that know about it or share about it, or you happen to see it because you happen to be at the ESPYs, or I had heard about it because of a newspaper article, or I bet we could unmute some mics and we could go down that line of everybody's kind of moment of chance where they found this. But how do we take chance out of it? So, you know, a little kid who's 4 or 5 years old and wants to play soccer just like their siblings, but happens to miss a leg, knows that they can go do that. And there's a place for them, and that they're seen and they're included. And so that's just my really quick hijack of this conversation, because I think it's such a powerful thing. And I love watching films. Obviously, I'm biased to Fresh Tracks, but Andrew, your story is like a prime example of your own journey. And you talk to any Paralympian and every single one down the line. It's so incredible to hear those stories. And I just think that that's the power that sport has, and that's the power that media has. Take chance out of it. Organizations like Angel City to provide opportunities to raise that awareness. Anyone want to tell us their moment of chance, how they found out about adaptive sport or the community as an entirety?
I will.
Yeah.
I actually found out from a friend of mine. I was racing able body, which is such a terrible term, I feel like. And I haven't come up with a better one, but I'm trying to work on it. But I was racing able body, and I had, because I've been a cyclist my whole life. Was a cyclist when I was a mountain bike racer when I was younger, and then I had surgery and messed up. I had permanent damage in my right leg, so I classify as a paracyclist now. But I found cycling, and my dad and mom always pushed me to not be defined by having a disability. So I had no idea that para sport even existed till I was 26 years old, and I was at a bike race, and I was working with one of the promoters, and we were watching the 2012 the 2012 Olympic women's road race. And my boss at the time said, you could be there. And I laughed at him because I was like, yeah, I ride with a leg and a half on a good day. Most times it's just a single leg, like, no way. And then that's when I found out about the sport, and I had no idea. And then I actually told my parents about it. My dad was adamant against it just because of this kind of thought process to parasport and people with a disability in general. And he's always been a big advocate in not letting something define you and being the victim, I guess. And then I went to a race, and there was a guy that was missing a leg and an arm riding a road bike with a mountain bike handlebar, and my dad went for a bike ride and unclipped and pedaled with one leg, and then he comes back and he's like, oh my God, I have such a newfound respect for this. And now it's like everyone we know, everyone he talks to, he's exposing them to. So I think it's kind of cool that he's giving those people that opportunity. So for me, it's definitely more about the exposure, because it was a chance for me. But you see all these little 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and now I'm rambling, but you see all these little 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds that are missing a limb or have a shorter limb, because when I was going through limb lengthening surgery, there are a lot of people that couldn't even put their hand to their hair to put it in a ponytail or even brush it. So to have that such an early age, I think it's huge for people. I think it's huge for life. Like, I don't know about you guys, so I guess my question for you guys would be how much the sport or finding sport has changed your life outside of sport. And not necessarily because of the sport, but just like the mindset from it and the exposure to other people and other stories.
I got questions for you.
Or Andrew.
Why don't you go first?
I think well, first of all, Sam, I love hearing the perspective change that your own dad had, right? Like, and just going through that, and it's just, you don't know what you don't know. And it's a perfect example of you don't know what you don't know. I think for me personally, sport, so super high level, I was paralyzed when I was 18. So I've been paralyzed for 12 years. And I was a swimmer competitively since I was 7. So I grew up on a pool deck, weekdays, weekends, you name it, that's where we were at. And I always loved the sport. And when I was injured, it was right after high school, and I wasn't going the college path for competition because I wanted to go to a D1 school for journalism, and just was like, you know what, I was a good varsity swimmer in high school, but I wasn't that good, and I didn't know that I really wanted to walk on. So long and short, I thought swimming was just going to be a leisurely life skill for me after that, a hobby, if you will. And when I was injured, there was just a lot of assumptions of all the things that I wouldn't do again. And I think that was the natural thing. And it wasn't necessarily that I felt bad for myself. It's just I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was injured through a medical mistake, for lack of better words. And so I didn't get a lot of support from my medical team because there's too many liabilities around it. And so with that, I kind of was out on my own. My parents and I had to figure this out. And so when I found sport, it was a game changer. I got in the pool 2.5 months after my injury. But for me, it was chance. I mean, it was a newspaper article on Melissa Stockwell, who was competing for the 2008 Beijing trials to make it to the Paralympics in the sport of swimming. At the time, she's now a triathlete. And it was being hosted at the University of Minnesota, just 20 minutes down the road from my family's home. And I was so against going that night because I didn't know. And I was so afraid. I was so uncomfortable with my new body. And the really long and short of it was it was a Saturday, and Monday I went back to the pool with my dad, and I ended up getting in the water that Monday. And I had never been more terrified to do something in my life than I think I was that Monday afternoon when I sat on the edge of the pool and looked at the water and was like, oh, we're doing this. Okay, cool. And I was still trying to figure out just getting out of my wheelchair, let alone get in a pool. And when I got in, I think it was the first time I truly understood that idea of, even though everything felt out of control, I still had control. And that for me was such a freedom that it brought to understand that, like, if I can place one hand in front of the other and form a freestyle stroke and swim, even though it's different, who's to say I can't go back into the classroom and do this, or I can't go live on my own and do that, or on down the line. And so I think for me, sport really changed that perception of myself and gave me the confidence to, as cheesy as it is, but the confidence to love myself again enough to like put myself out into the world and be a fully functioning human being who later, because of the movement, found my husband. And so it's like, I can never even put into words what it's changed. And that's what I love. I had the honor to help a young boy get in the water for the first time after his injury at Angel City Games 2 years ago now. And he was about 3 months post-injury. And I will never forget that moment. I mean, he may not have been emotional about it. I was like sobbing under my goggles. I was a mess because I just know what that is and what it does, not for even yourself. Like, swimming helped my whole family heal. And it was something that brought us together again and bridged our past to our present and let us look towards our future. And I don't know, that's a whole thing. So Andrew, I want to hear about you and your answer to Sam's question, because I think that's a really great question.
I think you touched on it. The one thing about sport is it changes your perspective on life, helps you to discover that you have what's possible for what, like John Register says, like your new normal. You help discover, who you are as an individual. Once you discover, kind of sport in your life, once you discover that you can be you can be whatever you want. Like, you just have to do it a little bit differently. That's all there is to it. And once you realize that you can do anything, you just got to do it a little bit differently. And you accept that. You accept who you are, and you accept what you want to do in life, whatever it may be. Like for me, like loading canoes or loading kayaks in the back of my truck, I go fishing just like anybody else. I just have to find a way to do it a little bit differently. I go hunting in Alaska. I do my outdoor living things. I go ice climbing. I do whatever I want. I just have to do it a little bit differently. I strap the cleats to my knees when I climb the ice. When I go hiking through the trees, I have to fasten machetes onto my crutches. Like, I make it happen. You have to do things different. And no matter how difficult or different it is, you find a way. And you kind of forget that that's possible when you are put in a wheelchair, because life is known to you, who you are, what you think you are, and then kind of life is torn away from you and everything is changed. When you're put in a wheelchair, you're like, oh, guess what, you're different now. Everything you thought you knew, that's different now. But when you start building yourself up as an individual and rediscovering the new you and who you are, sport really opens those eyes and really helps that to become possible, whether it be like a child, like what you said, or whether it be a young adult like what I was, or whether it be someone who's normal. We're all unique in our own way, but whether it be someone who's normal helps to realize, their true potential or their possibility. You really shouldn't be held back by any of your thoughts or any of your ideas. And that's what, Paralympics gives to the world. It helps to introduce everyone to the thought of inspiration and the new perspective that helps you to overcome just about anything. You just have to find your own way. And yeah, happy to take any other questions.
Do any of you guys tuning in have any questions?
Unmute my audio. No, just so freaking impressed with all of you and everything you've done and, you know, what you've accomplished. And it's just amazing. It's incredible. I've known about Paralympics for a really long time. But to hear your stories and to see the film, it's really, really inspiring. So
Can I ask how you were exposed to the Paralympics? What was your moment?
Oh, well, I don't think there was an exact moment, but my client, this is like 25 years ago, my client who had been my client for 13 years, I believe, she left the business that was the business I was doing the work for, and she moved to Idaho. And when she moved to Idaho, she became a volunteer for the Paralympics. And so I became much more familiar with it when she got involved with that. But I think I'd known about the Paralympics as long as they'd been around.
Yeah,
so.
That's awesome.
And then I have this wonderful connection now because Cammie's my niece.
I love how everything somehow ties back to these Angel City folks. They're the best. They really are.
I have to say I loved what Andrew was just saying a moment ago, because it added a whole nother dimension to, in my brain, of the notion of adaptive sports. When you start talking about putting machetes on your ski poles and things like that. I mean, but your brain and your willingness to think creatively and solve problems and all is really amazing. And it also made me think that so many people are disabled simply by their attitude and not their physical, anything about their physical being, you know. But
so true.
Really impressive listening to you.
I can always count on him to say something impressive.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I love that. And Andrew is also an incredible fisherman and very generous with what he catches. We know Andrew pretty well. I consider him a good friend. And the other day a knock on the door came and 35 pounds of fresh Alaskan fish was on our doorstep that he caught like 2 days prior. And I looked at Jay and I was like, oh, this is going to fuel me for Tokyo. Keep it coming, Andrew. But he's an awesome fisherman. I think it's just, he's like an outdoorman through and through.
Yeah, just follow him on Instagram. You'll see his catches of the 60-pound halibuts. And
Really?
It's crazy.
that'd be impressive.
Thank you.
Well, you guys have done a great job. Thank you.
Well, thank you. What's your favorite outside of skiing, like outdoor adventure?
Us?
Andrew.
Oh.
Well, you too. What's your favorite outdoor adventure? Or are you an indoor person?
No. We lead photo expeditions and photo safaris all over the world.
Oh.
So our stuff is
Just casual.
Want to come to Alaska? I have a bed and breakfast.
Oh, really? Where?
Palmer, Alaska.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Huh.
Haven't made it up there yet. No, we did a lot of work in Southeast. I mean, all over Antarctica to the high Arctic. And we focused a lot on Africa in recent years. So when we're on safari or when we're taking our friends or people on safaris, the one thing we don't get is exercise because you're sitting a lot of time in safari vehicles. And because we choose camps that are in wildlife areas complete with predators, you don't go running around or doing a whole hell of a lot. So it's always a trick for us to be getting in decent shape to go and then recovering from 3 weeks or more being gone without the exercise that we love to be getting. So
cool. So the next Angel City Clinic is a safari led by you guys and photography. Yeah.
Tammy, what do you think?
Is that what I heard?
Sure, why not? We just had to reschedule all our 2020 to 2021, so
I bet
we're all in the same boat on that in that regard. But
Yep.
we met playing volleyball.
I
It was a
love
pickup
it.
game.
Quite literally.
Quite.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I love that this is a small, intimate group because then we can chat. Does anybody else have their moment they want to share? We have any other takers? Let us know how you heard about Paralympics or adaptive sport or Angel City.
Or Angel.
Oh, I'd like to ask Cammie, how did you find out about Angel City? How did you get into this?
Sure. And thanks for being here, guys. Love you.
We screwed up. We were on the wrong.
It's all good. It's actually, kind of just by chance, as Mallory said so many times. I was fortunate to know Katie Holloway, who's the captain of the sitting volleyball women's team. She played on the standing basketball team at CSUN, which is a school in California that I played at, just a few years ahead of me. But she has stayed a part of the program mainly because my coach was so moved that she had, played on the Division I team as an amputee. That's pretty abnormal. So a great feat for her. And she had kind of guided me through my professional basketball career, given me a lot of advice, motivating me to kind of think what's beyond sport, because that is, it has an expiration date. And I came home from when I had decided to retire and was just doing a lot of soul searching, trying to figure out what I wanted to dedicate my life to. And she just invited me to an Angel City clinic. It was a sitting volleyball clinic, and I just, firsthand experienced the sport and the coaches and kind of that just welcoming environment, and kind of knew that was where I wanted to be, because sport had been so impactful in my own life, and to see that opportunity for others was just my calling. So I had a long series of interviews with Clayton here. Actually wrote him a thank you letter and spelled his last name wrong. Thankfully, he never checked the mail, so he didn't get that until I had the job for like 3 months. But
I did see it eventually, right?
You did, yeah. And it was totally just on a whim of me being unemployed and Katie being encouraging. So
I love that.
I love that.
yeah.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Thank you.
It's funny because my mom, your grandma, is 87 years old this year. She just turns 87. But it was like a year ago when we came down to visit, and she lives in an assisted living place. And my mother never played a sport in her life, never broke a sweat. She was like fashion model, beautiful, and all that stuff. And it totally cracked me up. She's like, we're down there visiting. She's like, oh, I've got to go. I don't want to be late for volleyball. I'm like, what? And we went in to the room, and they have, the seated volleyball with the ball is a beach ball. And my mother was wailing on that ball. I was totally cracking up. She really had a killer instinct. She'd never been into sports before, but all of a sudden, here's my mother's competitive sport edge.
It never dies.
Yeah.
In all of us somewhere.
Yeah.
In all of us. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, thank you for being such a gracious host, and Clayton and Angel City team. This was awesome.
This was a blast.
Yes, thank you. It was definitely a wonderful night. And thank you.
Where can we tell people to watch this?
So we are working, we'll probably announce something the next month. We're working on global distribution right now. So.
Okay.
Oh, how awesome.
Good. We'd
Cool.
love to pass it
It's a
along.
great story.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very, very cool. So thank you again so much to our speakers, Paralympian Andrew Kurka, Paralympian and executive producer of Fresh Tracks, Mallory Weggemann, and executive producer, Jeremy Snyder, the TFA group, and Hartford for making tonight possible.